One of the most critical moments in the play, Raisin in the Sun, of course, is in the scene near the end of the play where Lindner, who who is the representing the neighborhood, he's the neighborhood representative, comes to the house, and it's a very interesting moment because, of course, he is there to essentially convince the family that they should not purchase the home or they should not try to move into the neighborhood. And his goal is to convince them that this is a bad idea. And it's worth looking closely at that scene. He comes into the place and he says, "Hello." The description is very careful. Ruth crosses mechanically to the bedroom door and opens it and lets it swing open freely. And slowly, as the lights come up on Walter within, still in his coat, sitting at the far corner of the room, he looks up and out through the room to Lindner. Now, Walter has just been arguing with his sister, and they've had this great confrontation in the family about what has happened to the money that Walter has collected and what is going to happen after that. So there's a lot of tension in the place. Linda walks in and he's putting his briefcase on the table, starting to unfold papers, and he unscrews fountain pens. He says, "Well, I certainly was glad to hear from you people." Walter has begun the trek out of the room slowly and awkwardly, rather like a small boy passing the back of his sleeve across his mouth from time to time. So there's a description of Walter who walks into the room. He says, "Life can really be so much simpler than people let it be most of the time. Well, with whom do I negotiate? You, Mrs. Younger, or your son here?" Mama sits with her hands folded on her lap and her eyes closed as Walter advances. Travis goes closer to Linda and looks at the papers curiously. "Just some official papers, sorry, Sonny." Then Mama says, "Travis, you stay right here and you can make him understand what you're doing. Walter Lee, you teach him good, like Willie Harris taught you. You show where our 5 generations done come to. Go ahead, son." Walter then says, "Well, Mr. Linda, we called you because, well, me and my family, well, we are very plain people. I mean, I have worked as a chauffeur most of my life, and my wife here, she does domestic work in people's kitchens. So does my mother. I mean, we are plain people." Linda then says, "Oh, yes, I understand." Walter then continues, "My father almost beat a man to death once because this man called him a bad name or something. You know what I mean?" Linda says, "No, I'm afraid I don't." Walter then says, "Yeah, well, what I mean is that we come from people who had a lot of pride. I mean, we are very proud people, and that's my sister over there, and she's going to be a doctor, and we are very proud." Linda says, "Well, I'm sure that's very nice, but what I'm telling you is that we called you over here to tell you that we are very proud, and that this Travis here, this boy, this is my son, and he makes the 6th generation of our family in this country, and we have all thought about your offer." "Well, good, good. And we have decided to move into our house because my father, he earned it for us, brick by brick. We don't want to make no trouble for nobody or fight no causes, and we will try to be good neighbors. And that's all we got to say about that. We don't want your money. I take it then that you've decided to occupy." That's what the man said. "Then I would like to appeal to you, Miss Younger. You are older and wiser and understand things better." Mama says, "I'm afraid you don't understand. My son said we was going to move, and there ain't nothing left for me to say. You know how these young folks is nowadays, mister. Can't do a thing with them." Linda folds up his stuff and he says, "Well, if you are that final about it, there's nothing left for me to say." He finishes, ignored by the family who are concentrating on Walter Lee. At the door, Linda halts and looks around. "I sure hope you people know what you're getting into." And he shakes his head and he leaves. It's a very powerful moment because in that moment, Walter has expressed what has come to the point where he's taken the position with the mother and agreed with the mother that they're going to move into the house. Linda is there to convince them otherwise. Linda is offered to pay them not to move into that into that place, and the mother and the family decide that they're going to move into that place. It seems to me that economically, it's an interesting decision because, of course, they would have made money on moving to another property. But it seems to me that Lorraine Hansberry has decided that there is a greater principle at work, and the greater principle is the question of the freedom of African Americans to live wherever they want to live where they choose to live, to have the freedom to do so, and not to be stymied and tied in by segregation. Linda says, I sure hope you people know what you're doing. And what he means is that even if when they make this move, they're going to face a great deal of discrimination. They're not going to be welcomed in that place. They're going to deal with a great deal of struggle surrounding it. The play was hugely successful. But the interesting question that one must ask about it is that, of course, the play was written for the Broadway stage and the play was written for the white audience. And most of the reviews made it clear that this was the first time that many white audiences were seeing an African American family with all the challenges and experiences and the questions and so on and so forth that happened in every family in America, in the normal family in America. They were normalized as far as they were concerned. This was an African American family going through its woes in the same way that Willie Loman and his family in Death of a Salesman were going through their own similar kind of problems. In the same way that in Tennessee Williams's Streetcar Named Desire, a family is living in their house and they're dealing with their same problems. And what Lorraine Hansberry had done was that she had said, all of us, the Lomans, the folks in Streetcar Named Desire, and of course the family in Raisin in the Sun were all Americans dealing with the pressures of society, whether it's racism, whether it's economic pressures, whether it's poverty, whether it's immigration, and so on and so forth. And in doing so, they are trying to understand themselves. For the African American, it was transformative for the audience to see them in this manner and to understand and read them in this manner. But at the same time, Lorraine Hansberry was not hesitant about saying that the civil rights effort was about African Americans making sacrifices in order to advance the larger freedoms of America. And there are real sacrifices that were being made. Because, of course, there's another way of thinking about it, which is to say that they should have taken their money and kept themselves segregated. And they may have made more money that way. But Lorraine Hansberry seems to be arguing that there is a greater principle beyond that seems to be at the heart of where she's going. The play has gone on to have great success, and I think it's worth paying attention to. You'll see some of the questions that I have for you about that play help you to think about some specific themes and subjects that arise in the work. But this is of course one of the hallmarks, classic African American plays of the 20th century.